Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report, Death by Algorithm. That's right. The truth may trigger an algorithm in your browser, taking you to this show that has actual facts. Beware. Stacy.
Yeah, you and I have been traveling quite a lot lately, and when you tune into MSNBC or CNN or Fox, it's 100% nowadays, 100% just opinion shows. They don't offer any economic or financial shows, which is remarkable because, Bill Clinton is the one that said it's the economy, stupid. What really people are going to vote on is the economy. And yet you have these presenters who are supposed to offer political opinion about the, politics and the beltway and the bubble they live in. But they don't know what voters are going to vote on economic matters. And yet Rachel Maddow has no idea, for example, what's going on in the U.S. economy because she doesn't talk about that like we do here.
Look, I can basically, within 3 minutes and 3 basic economics, finance questions, I can obliterate Rachel Maddow and prove she's financially illiterate and therefore unjustified to have any kind of presence in media.
Her virtues are very high according to her signaling metrics, but I want to look at some data going on in the United States because GDP was up 3.2%. So we're going to drill down into that data and find out what's really happening with the U.S. economy because Associated Press tweeted breaking S&P 500 and NASDAQ indexes close at record highs, recovering all the ground they lost in the nosedive late last year. You could look at that and say, well, the stock markets benefit, of course, a very small segment of the American population. Something like the top 5% of income earners own like 90% of all stocks. That's a debate to have and a question to look at. Is it the fact that the Fed has suggested as soon as the stock market dove that they're going to print more money and they're not going to taper and the Ponzi scheme can keep on going? Or is it the GDP numbers at 3.2%? And of course, MSNBC and CNN won't necessarily want to talk about that because that might look good for the orange clown.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the stock market keeps pointing toward an economy and a country that is kind of gone loopy with all the money it's making. I mean, the average stock market property investor making trillions of dollars across the United States. The wealth and income gap, there's 2 parts to it. There's the people who don't make any money and they're living on the streets. That's the gap down. Of course, on the flip side, you've got millions of Americans that have never had more wealth ever in the history. And they're probably the wealthiest group of individuals ever in the history of the world on this scale. I mean, this is an amazing wealth generation.
And again, you tune into CNN or Fox or MSNBC. Do you ever see those people ever leave New York City or some of them in Washington, D.C.? They never leave there. And all of that free money that's coming from the Fed is feeding the property and stock market bubbles there where they live. So they look around them and they see just everybody getting wealthy. You and I, as you know, we've crossed the country twice by car, driving all over. So we've seen a little bit more and been exposed to a little bit more. Dow Jones Market Watch, opinion behind the great GDP numbers, the real economy is slumping. So they look at those 3.2% GDP numbers, but they say that the heart of the real economy, private sector consumption and investment, slowed sharply in the first quarter to 1.3% annual rate, the slowest in nearly 6 years. Consumer spending rose only 1.2% in the first quarter after a healthy 2.5% growth in the previous quarter, but spending on durable goods plunged 5.3%, the worst since 2009 when we were in the midst of the last global financial crisis.
Right. Well, you're relying on data that is not very well defined. Like the GDP number, the gross domestic product number, is notorious for being very opaque, and it doesn't really give a picture that you can draw any definitive conclusions from. That's true of almost every number that's produced by the government, because it behooves them to control the data, because the data controls the algorithms and the indexes and things like the VIX volatility index. If you can manipulate the VIX volatility index, you control the market effectively. And if you can do that using very spurious data, it's in your advantage to do so. Is this sustainable? Well, I would say no, it's not sustainable.
Okay, so they're looking at the real data, and they are using one of Barack Obama's former economic advisors to say poo-poo all of this. Business investment has slowed. Investment in the real economy is down. But how did the economy grow by 3.2% if all those numbers are down? Consumer spending is down, investment, CapEx is down. Where did it grow? Well, I'll tell you, because this is really interesting data. California. The only bright spot was investment in intellectual property, such as software, movies, and R&D. This is great news, but these intellectual property numbers are a bit squiggy, which I don't understand that as a financial or economic term. Squiggy. Lenny and Squiggy, I remember that.
Well, it's a cousin of Twiggy.
Well, okay, so California is basically producing all of the wealth going on in the United States right now, and we have a whole headline coming up about California and their economy.
Well, look at Disney. They've got the Avengers film out there, did $1 billion something in its opening weekend. They have the Star Wars franchise. It goes back to, and they've been very active. The lobbyists in Washington are very keen on keeping what we would call a cartel, the copyright cartel, by extending copyright indefinitely as part of their profit mix, and then extending those laws globally. They want the whole world to adopt U.S.-style perpetual copyright laws. That's an incredible monopoly position, and there's only a few entertainment companies now really left, and the margins on these properties are enormous. So yeah, I can see where the GDP could get a boost, but I mean, intellectually and culturally, you're talking about, what the French would call cultural Chernobyl, the American slime that kind of permeates the global zeitgeist. If you just watch the Anthony Bourdain shows, and you'll start to throw up.
That's your view. I'm going to look at the positive, and that it's not just Hollywood. It is Silicon Valley. It is farming. It is agriculture. It is healthcare. The entire economy across California actually dominates the globe in terms of how much profit they are able to earn. Whatever it is, it has to be studied. It's like the German Mittelstand sort of companies in terms of how good they are there. This is a headline from Bloomberg. The California economy isn't just a U.S. powerhouse. There are good reasons why one American state leaves big countries like France and Italy in the rearview mirror and overtook the U.K. last year. California has 1/8 of the U.S. population of 327.7 million. It's a third of the size of Japan, half of Germany, and not quite 2/3 of the UK, but its economic strength looms larger than any of them. Just about every measure of growth shows that the Golden State is peerless among developed economies for increasing population, expanding gross domestic product, improved joblessness, rising personal income, investment in innovation, and wealth created by its stocks and bonds. So the California GDP, by the way, just to put it in context, is #1 in the United States, and it's 60% larger than #2, which is Texas.
Well, certainly they have Microsoft, they have Apple, they have
Microsoft
is in Seattle, it's up north.
Yeah.
But Silicon Valley,
they have
clearly.
Facebook, they have
right?
Uber, Lyft, all of these.
These are the biggest, the biggest corporations in the world.
They have
Apple's
all these
the
VCs.
biggest VCs and all that stuff. So there's a potent mix,
yes.
right? So no doubt that it is a potent mix of output for sure.
Something is happening there with innovation. So we're going to look at drill down into some of the data here. Few of the 34 nations in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development come close to California's 3% average annual growth rate for the most recent 5-year period, more than 2.2% for the 50 states and 2.4% average for the 19 countries sharing the euro currency. So this is a chart showing California. The only area really beating them is China. And
well, let me ask you this. So those who argue that the tax rates in California are onerous, it doesn't seem like it's cutting into their growth.
That's what they do mention, is like that people complain that there's so many regulations and taxes and it's going to destroy it. But it doesn't, because such vitality catapulted the largest U.S. state to #5 economy globally last year, behind Germany, Japan, China, and the US. It overtook the UK 2 years after Britain voted to leave the European Union, triggering economic struggles, including a record devaluation of the pound. It's a lot to do with their publicly traded companies out of California, because California's publicly traded companies returned 420%. By comparison, the S&P 500 gained 239%. China's index advanced 57%. Japan's TOPIX climbed by 70%, and Germany's DAX just 121%. So their companies are returning more, and it has a lot to do with their margins. I mean, these are the craziest numbers of this entire article in Bloomberg. California companies turned $100 of sales into $57 of gross profit. They topped the $49 average for the US. So in the US, you sell $100 worth of goods, $49 is profits. Here, $100, and they get $57 of gross profits. That's versus $35 for China, $39 for Japan and Germany.
Right, that's because when you scale up these companies, it's just a matter of adding one more server to the network, and the enterprise value increases exponentially. So the cost of another server is somewhat, small compared to the growth that you get, the exponential growth, Metcalfe's law of the value of the network expanding exponentially versus the linear addition of networks of nodes, right? So this is the California effect. Now, in the grocery business, right, to put this into context, their profit margins are 1%. And that's a huge part of the economy is the grocery business, and it's a 1% margin. Here you're talking 60, 70% margins.
Well, it's also indicating that they have a lot of monopolies there, because only a monopoly could get that sort of profit margin, which is interesting that Warren Buffett loves to invest in monopolies, and yet he was very slow to enter the tech sector. And here they're showing and demonstrating that, 20 years after the dot-com crash, that they've now have we have a different paradigm happening. We have monopolies controlling everything, but they did invest in jobs, because what did corporate California do with its robust earnings? It created more jobs, increasing its employees by 15%, twice the average for corporate America, almost double China's 8%, more than 7 times Japan's 2%, and almost quadruple Germany's 4%.
Well, it shows you the benefit of having nice weather. Why not surf, get a tan, and build a multi-billion-dollar company while you're on the beach? Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back from our surfing, we'll have a lot more coming your way. So, cowabunga. Whoa, hey, we're back from our surfing. Surfing USA. Beach Boys, they called it. 2 girls for every guy. Okay? That's how you build an economy, world. Take that to your Davos. Smoke it. Yeah.
Well, Max, we're talking about California being the #1 economy in the United States, #5 in the world, has overtaken the United Kingdom. And there's another thing that the U.S. is #1 in the world, of course, and that's incarceration. We lock up more people than anybody else, at least according to publicly available statistics. Perhaps China has more, who knows? But here's a very shocking headline this past week from the San Francisco Chronicle, and it is juvenile hall costs skyrocket. Counties haven't reduced expenses as the number of youth in juvenile hall has plummeted. As pressure grows to trim spending, officials say it won't be easy. A lot of juvenile halls, prisons for juveniles in California, they have managed to cut the number of children they incarcerate. So some of these juvenile halls are only a third full. However, they still have the same amount of union guards and service around these, and the building costs. So California taxpayers spent an average of $284,700 to keep a child locked up in juvenile hall last year. County-level data from the Board of State and Community Corrections reveal, up from an inflation-adjusted $143,200 in 2011. So that's doubling the cost in just 8 years. But several Bay counties were among those spending the most per child. topped by Santa Clara, where the figures showed an annual cost of $531,400 to detain a youth offender in juvenile hall.
No way.
$531,400 for one kid in juvenile hall in Santa Clara.
So some kid steals a candy bar from the 7-Eleven, and we pay $500,000 a year to keep him tied up in a juvenile hall.
Those in the Bay Area, where they're making a lot of money and their property prices are escalating rapidly. But yes, they're paying $531,000. They should just, they're good on profit margins in California. Basically, they should say, here, kid, take $300,000 and, don't commit any crimes for the next 10 years.
Well, I mean, clearly they could, even using the Lori Loughlin metric of what it costs to get into university, could afford the finest university in America with those types of numbers.
Part of the problem is that you have the building costs, so those are fixed. You have to pay these workers, the prison guards, who are mostly unionized. That's why California spends more on prisons now than they do on universities. But perhaps they could divert some of this, put the prison guards in the universities so they spend more on universities than they do on the prisons. But it's pretty decadent. They are the 5th largest economy in the world, and their profit margin, as we covered in the first half, is close to 60% that they're making on every buck of sales they make. So they could afford this, but very few other places in the world can be so decadent.
Well, obviously it's an absurd situation, and the only way it works is because these juvenile hall companies are able to tap into massive credit lines. And so if there's a bank industry willing to lend them to create these worthless juvenile halls that end up spending $500,000. I mean, that's $500,000 per child. You got to think of it this way. That's a $500,000 loan. So some banker made, $30,000, $40,000 per juvenile locked up in detention center. And then you get enough of those juveniles locked up, and now you've made $3, $4 million for the year, and you're 1,000 bankers in Los Angeles alone probably in on this scam like this. So that's where it pays off. They, in fact, then spend some of the money in the overall economy buying intellectual property stuff and going to see Disney movies, and so it recycles into the economy somewhat, but a lot of it's just socked away into Bel Air mansions that don't enter the general economy.
The article does not indicate how many are private prisons and how many are state-run prisons, but this is ultimately on the taxpayer, that the taxpayer has to pay for the incarceration rates. And the prison union guards, the guards there at the prison are unionized, and that is one of the most powerful lobbyist groups in California. So all governors, all state senators and congresspeople have to get the approval and support of any of the prison guards there. So I don't know if that situation could ever be corrected. But of course, in terms of education and, a lot of the wealth of California is tied to China, including the property markets in San Francisco and to a lesser extent, perhaps Los Angeles and certainly the regions around Los Angeles. I want to look at this tweet from Asad Abu Khalil, and he's looking at an article from The Economist, where The Economist is talking about Chinese money pouring into the Middle East, which is this is new for them. This is a new region for them to start investing in. But he points out from the article that diplomats from Beijing often have a command of Arabic that puts their Western counterparts to shame. So right now, the U.S. is very concerned about Chinese advancements in 5G technology and AI technology, but also that they're spending money on the Belt and Road Initiative and now investing in what America considers a part of their Monroe Doctrine, that we control the Middle East, and they're pouring billions in there, but also showing up with actual diplomats who could speak Arabic. Apparently, we don't have any, that many that could speak Arabic.
Yeah, and particularly these days with these apps you can download and learn the language in 48 hours. You'd think that some of these high-paid diplomats would simply put some headphones on and learn a few words of Arabic before they go over there and trying to cut deals. Chinese people obviously are not going to let their linguistic shortcomings get in the way of making a few $1 trillion.
It also shows what monopoly position and hubris does. So when you're the empire and you could bomb anybody and nobody could do anything about it, or you can squash an economy with sanctions and nobody could do anything about it. When you have to compete, you have to do things like innovate. You have to learn the language. You have to be better than the alternative, which is the empire.
Can you explain something to me?
Yeah.
Why is there no universally used sign language? In other words, every language in every country has a unique sign language. You would think that very easily, if we had a universal sign language that worked everywhere you went, all you had to do is learn sign language and you could communicate anywhere in the world. Why not? Why do we have different sign languages?
Garçon, can I have my bill? And there is money. Chinese money is behind some of the Arab world's biggest projects. Of course, The Economist has headlines that the region's autocrats appreciate Beijing's no-strings approach. Of course, the region, the Middle East, has been under our thumb for decades. So presumably we dealt with autocrats, right? But there's not much to see for the first 500 kilometers south of Oman's capital, Muscat, as the highway slices through the Hajar Mountains and down a barren coast. Then it hits Duqm, a sleepy fishing village that is being transformed into a mega port. The government's hope is to capture a share of the shipping trade between Asia, Africa, and Europe. And there in the middle of nowhere, a consortium of Chinese firms wants to invest $10 billion to build a 1,000-hectare industrial zone. Petrochemicals, glass, solar panels, car batteries, they want to attack all these markets, says Reggie Vermeulen, the port's CEO. So they're pouring billions of dollars in there. This, of course, could trigger U.S. investors possibly finally, giving up some money to develop infrastructure and projects like that. That's one thing about our empire that we do not do like the British Empire before us did, which is build infrastructure.
Right, and every single village and hamlet and port in every single town in every single country, the huddled masses are dying to see Disney films. And that's where we add value to the global economy with superheroes flying through space, saving the world for America that no longer exists.
Superheroes flying through space. Well, for decades, the Middle Kingdom saw the Middle East as a petrol station. About half of China's oil came from Arab states and Iran. Little went in the other direction. In 2008, the region got less than 1% of China's net outbound foreign direct investment. Skip ahead a decade, and Chinese money is everywhere. Ports in Oman, factories in Algeria, skyscrapers in Egypt's new capital. Last year, it pledged $23 billion in loans and aid to Arab states and signed another $28 billion in investment and construction deals. So,
Well, it speaks to the fact that oil is probably going to be less of a component in the global economy going forward because it's kind of running out. Even in Saudi Arabia, they're kind of hitting peak oil. So the governments there are diversifying. So they're embracing the globalization and to do these deals around the world. And so this is why you see these types of initiatives now, because we're heading into a post-carbon economy.
I mean, when they talk about the fact that it's connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe, this is part of that Belt and Road Initiative, but it goes back to the old Silk Road. And there was a book that we read once about something like 5,000 years of trade, and it's coming full circle. So global trade, before we invented these terms in the last few decades of globalization and free trade deals and stuff like that, there was a lot of amazing amounts of trade. And it all came from China, and it went to India, and it went to Africa, the Middle East, and I guess up to Europe.
Well, for thousands of years, the global economy was dominated by China and India. It's an anomaly that you had a brief period where America was really the global superpower. But now it's going back to the long-term trend, which would be China, India, and these countries dominating global economy.
So yeah, like I said, 5,000 years ago, China was the leader in world trade. You saw all these guys get in their boats and go over there, and now they're restoring that through the Belt and Road Initiative. And China just had their annual Belt and Road big meeting in confab, and now a lot of European nations, including Italy, was the first to really say, forget whatever the U.S. says or NATO or anything. We're going to do a deal with China because, our economy, of course, Italy is suffering greatly under the euro. So they need flows of capital to come in there, because capital is not flowing into Italy, it's flowing into Germany, and it's flowing into maybe the UK or other places in Europe. It's not flowing into their region, so they're looking for any capital that they could get in. Basically, they're in a depression, right? And they have their banking system on the verge. So they need, if Europe won't deal with them, if Europe won't trade with them, then they're going to have to trade with China. So China is stepping up and spending billions on, Western corporations who are willing to do deals with them on the Belt and Road Initiative.
This show is dubbed into Spanish, and I think we should dub it into Mandarin as well.
Why not?
We immediately quadruple our view numbers. I think that's an excellent idea. Why not?
We go by every regime in the world. We're in India, we're in Latin America, so our show has to abide by all sorts of regulations on free speech. It's not just America. If we were just America, we could say whatever we want, because of course you could say whatever you want here. But we have to abide by all the regulations. But again, here's a universal.
Wow. See? There.
Money. We're
going to do it all in sign language, Keiser Report.
He's saying, follow us on Twitter at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.